This video is sponsored by Hotone. Hi there, Perfecto Castro here and welcome to my channel. I hope you're having a great day. In this video, I'm going to show you how I've been using virtual dual guitar amps with the Hotone Ampero II Stomp. Here we go. So recently I've been using the Hotone Ampero II Stomp as my desktop guitar effects processor. And I've been enjoying the really small form factor and the great tones that are coming from this tiny little tone box. Here's a few clips of it in action. The Ampero II Stomp is not a new product, and there are many excellent videos diving into all its specs right here on YouTube. So in this video, I'm going to focus on how I've been using it as a virtual dual amp for both guitar and bass. We'll dive into my presets, and I'll show you how I have the Ampero II Stomp set up with Logic for the jam track. And speaking of the jam track, I have to give a shout out to Kuya Quirk one of my favorite drummers of all time. The groove I used in the jam track is from his Quirk Rock Volume 1 drum pack from Yurt Rock. Enjoy. Okay, let's start with the bass. This patch has parallel routing with each amp going into separate outputs. I set the signal split after the compressor. That way the compressor affects both amps. Amp A is the ampage flip model going into a 2x10 cab. And that is set to a mid-rangey tone. And then this is routed to output A, which goes out USB outs 1 and 2. And this is recorded onto its own stereo track in Logic. That is the top track on the screen right now. Amp B is the messy bass 400 amp model, and that is going into the 4x10D cabinet with the ribbon mic and the high cut turned all the way down. This tone I set to be the sub bass tone for the low end. The output then goes out of output B, and that is routed to USB outs 3 and 4, and that is also recorded to its own stereo track in Logic. This way, come mixdown, I just tweak the track volumes to taste to get a full bass tone. By the way, I want to point out that I'm not using any extra plugins in Logic to fix or sweeten up any of the individual tracks. So all the tones that you're hearing comes from the Ampero II Stomp itself. Okay, so here's my dual amp setup for the guitar preset. And unlike the bass patch, this routing is split and then it sums up at the mixer. So I'm only using USB outs 1 and 2. I already have the tone that I'm shooting for, so I didn't need separate outputs for each amp. This patch is inspired by Stevie Ray Vaughan's studio setup. So amp A is a dumbbell ODS1, and that is going into the messy 2x12 cab mic'd up with a ribbon mic. And then this is set to a big clean sound. So let me disable the other amp, and here's how that sounds. Now, amp B is the black super amp model going into its matching 4x10 cabinet, and it's mic'd up with a, the 57 style mic. And this is set to be the dirty amp with the volume all the way up to 10. And here is how that sounds. The broken up black super fills in the mids to blend in with the dumbbell amp model. And here they are together. I also added a tremolo to the amp B chain, which I'm using more as a tone shifter instead of a modulation effect. So engaged, it scoops the mids so it easily sits in the track. And disengage, it brings back the mids to make the tone cut easier. I also have effects blocks pre and post dual amps. The first effects block is a noise gate to keep things silent in between notes. Handy, especially if you're using single coils. The next block is for my drive, and I'll come back to this for a little bit because it's a little more involved. And then post amps, I have a dual delay with one side set to a quarter note and the other side set to a dotted quarter. And this is how that sounds. I have the high cut turned down, that way the delay repeats do not interfere with whatever I'm playing. And finally, the last effects block is a large plate reverb. I actually have two versions of this dual amp patch, and each one has different drives. So patch 1 uses the bend fuzz, as my drive, and I have the fuzz knob turned all the way down. That way it only gives a hint of breakup instead of all-out fuzz. This pushes the dual amps into a nice singing tone. The second version is currently my favorite, and it uses the satisfaction pedal, which is found in the frequency effects block. This is actually a tape saturation emulator that I'm using as a drive pedal, and this is how that sounds. It gives a really interesting character to the tone. Even though it's overdriven, it does not feel compressed under the fingers, unlike say a tube screamer or similar overdrive pedal. This is the lead tone that you hear in the jam track. I also have specific controls set for both patches in Stomp Box mode. Switch 1 is a control function that toggles the drive and the delay simultaneously. So I can go from a totally clean sound to the dirty lead sound. Switch 2 controls the tremolo, which, as already mentioned, I use as a tone shifter. So when engaged, it scoops the mids. Disengaged, it lets the mids back in for a more cutting tone. And switch 3 takes care of my tap tempo. I'm going to make these presets available on my website, so the link is in the description. The presets are free to download and use, but if you want to kick in a little extra support for my efforts, then please buy your own Practice Makes Perfecto t-shirt. Thanks in advance. The Hotone Ampero II Stomp works really well as a desktop guitar effects processor. It's a small enough footprint, and the classy white finish blends well with any minimalist desk setup. You have access to tons of amp models and effects, including the 20 official Celestron IRs, which are easy to tweak either on the unit's touch screen or the intuitive-to-use software editor on your computer. And you get multiple effects routing templates and 8 USB ins and outs, so you can dream up any rig that's flexible enough to record into your DAW. From dual amps into their own tracks like I have done here, to wet and dry rigs, to affected plus unaffected DI tracks, to reamping. Now, even though there are a lot of possibilities, they are not endless, because at some point you will run into the Ampero II Stomp's limits. My original SRV inspired patch needed 2 drives for each amp model. The tube clipper for the dumbbell, and a tube screamer style to tighten up the black super. And this is how that sounds. actually get the SRV chime if you turn off the tube clipper on the dumbbell. Now I wanted to add a post dual amp stereo delay, but as you can see right here, all the effects blocks choices are grayed out. So you're gonna have to pick and choose your effects blocks within the limits of the Ampero II Stomp's processing power. Another quirk that's somewhat annoying is the data transfer between the hardware pedal and the software editor. Whenever you tweak something on the Ampero II Stomp itself, be it a foot switch or something on the touch screen. The differences between the hardware and software settings takes a bit of time to transfer over USB, and that disrupts your workflow, especially if you've already settled into the groove of your recording session. I'd love to just use the editor for tweaking, but then again, just getting in and out of the tuner triggers the data transfer. Perhaps a software editor update with clickable buttons to toggle the tuner and control functions on the pedal is in order. That way, we no longer have to touch the pedal whenever it's connected to the software editor. This quirk aside, the important thing is that the Hotone Ampero II Stomp is a solid sounding and great feeling tone box. That is a welcome addition to your recording arsenal. There you have it. That is the Hotone Ampero II Stomp in use for dual virtual amps here in my recording setup. Big thanks to Hotone for sponsoring this video and for giving me free reign in presenting the Ampero II Stomp to all you guys. The Ampero II Stomp is now available in the Philippines from gcrockboard.com, in the EU from Thomann, and here in the US from Amazon. If this video has convinced you to get your very own Ampero II Stomp, then please use my affiliate links in the video description. Thank you so much for your extra support. Now, if you dug this video, please give it a thumbs up like, hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and don't forget to ring that bell. And let me know what you think of the Hotone Ampero II Stomp in the comment section. Now click on an end card to go watch another video, or you can go grab your guitar and play something. You all know the drill. Practice makes perfecto. Cheers, guys.